Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon. We're Chabados of Delmer, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich, statewide news service, and jbiztechphilly.com. We have two very, very special guests with us. First, on my left at least, is Bob Nevins. You're the founder and executive director of the Saratoga WarHorse. We'll find out what that means in 1 second. And then we have Lance Allen Wang, commander of the Albany Jewish War Veterans of Post 105. That's in Albany, but of the whole United States. It's one of the representatives. So both Lance and Bob, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be such a special interview. I'm really excited about this. This is one of those heartening type of stories that I think you have to tell. And Bob, why don't you start off first with telling us the history of why you founded Saratoga WarHorse?
Well, Saratoga WarHorse actually is founded in response to the increasing number of suicides in the veteran population, especially the younger generation that's coming back from war now. And
can I interrupt you right at the beginning?
Sure.
I know a psychologist in Watertown that deals with the Mountain Division, and they've been going to Afghanistan. He says 50% of people come back, the soldiers come back with problems. And I wanted to, and I've heard this question, because in World War II, maybe they say buck up and just get back in society, or, are we more sensitive to it, or are there you think there are more real issues with problems?
They're finally beginning to recognize that this has been there from day one. What was shell shock in World War I, which put thousands of those veterans on the street as homeless, is continuing today. Back then, everybody was in the war at the same time, so they all dealt with it at the same time.
And it was a shorter time period.
Short time period. Now, you have, since Vietnam, veterans coming back, winding up on the street with no real support for the emotional issues. Everybody was focused on the physical wounds, but the emotional wounds have always been there. And now we're finally starting to deal with them because we've got the medical component under control. But why are record numbers of veterans still taking their own lives? Why today are more veterans dying by their own hand than in combat? What's wrong with this picture? Okay? Well, there's a lot that we have to pay attention to now.
Could it be that, I'm just throwing out an idea, and again, I always say when I'm not an authority, I'm a rabbi, I'm not a psychologist, but I've read that they save so many more lives. I mean, someone would be wounded in World War II and, probably would most likely die. But here, because the medical is, like you're saying, so well attuned, and I know people in even Vietnam, like yourself, that they saved their lives, but now, it's horrible for me to think that people go without an arm and a leg. I remember my father, who was in World War II, he just says, he broke him up. He says he saw people, he says, big husky, a 20-year-old and a soldier without a leg, It's like, it's just so traumatic. Maybe that would be a reason, like they're looking at themselves and they're handicapped, and would that be a reason?
Bob served in Vietnam. So.
Yeah, I know. That's what
Well, the physical injuries, I flew those rescue helicopters in Vietnam. I picked up the amputees, and they were happy to survive. But it's when you come back, and then you have to deal with the emotional part of all of this. So they can deal with the loss of a limb and still function. But when you don't know somebody's the walking wounded, and you just ignore them, or they're afraid to come forward and talk about, I have nightmares. I can go back, and as I talk about what I do now, I talk to older individuals, and they say, well, my father was in World War II. And I said, did your father sleep? Oh, no. Why wasn't your father emotionally connected to you? Well, that was my dad. Well, no, it's not your dad. Those are the signs that you've been affected emotionally by this, and you don't know how to deal with it. And what we've discovered in this program that we do is no amount of talk therapy is going to talk somebody out of a traumatic event. So the emotional damage that's done, and what we're finding, and we can talk about the program, how it works, but The bottom line is when a veteran or a wife calls me and says, we've given up, we've had all the drugs, we've been to all the therapy, nothing works, can you help my husband? I just ask him one question, well, how's he sleeping?
Mm.
Really?
And the answer is the same every time.
He doesn't.
Are you kidding? He hasn't slept more than an hour in 5 years. He sits up at night, you know, in the living room in the dark.
That's not healthy.
It's not healthy, but he has to go to work, so he functions as best he can, but when he comes home,
So how many hours do you sleep at night?
how do I sleep? I sleep great.
Okay.
I sleep great. Because I'm so emotionally satisfied by
Yeah.
what happens, because we're actually creating this emotional change in people.
Well, explain how Saratoga WarHorse creates that change.
Well, here's the secret of really what's happening here. When somebody comes to us that's so emotionally shut down, we don't talk therapy, we don't get into anything along those lines. If you can't sleep, I send you an airline ticket, we pay for your hotel, we pay for everything, fly you to Saratoga. I bring them into a 3-day program. The first day, they just get acquainted with some of the other veterans that have come, and they begin to realize, oh, we all have the same problem. We don't want to talk to anybody. We're not going to the store. I don't want to leave my house. I'm tired of the therapy, the labels, all that. So we don't get into that. I take them into, on the second day of the program, we bring them to the farm. We put them through a morning of instruction on what's going to happen to them, why this works, the psychology of what's happening with the horse. And we just say, we're going to teach you the secrets of horse whispering. And your job is to go into this round pen, and you're going to communicate with this horse. And what's so powerful about this,
A real horse?
a real horse.
Real live horse.
Yeah.
And these are off-the-track thoroughbreds, okay, that have had their own dramatic life, you know, trying to make it to the Kentucky Derby one day, and then they're out of a job the next day. You know, what do you do with these horses? These horses wind up sometimes falling through the cracks, winding up at the slaughterhouse. Exact same scenario with the veteran. If somebody doesn't recognize those symptoms and go in there and pull them out, then they're going to fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So we bring them in, we teach them this language, and what's so powerful here is man is a predator by nature, period. So we treat each other as predators. No matter how you disguise it, we are treating each other as predators. But a horse is a flight animal. A horse will flee from danger rather than confront it and fight. So when we teach the veteran the language of the horse, what happens in this procedure, and it's the same every time, when that horse recognizes that the predator is actually speaking its language, the horse will bond with the human. When that happens, and this is the secret of what we do, when that happens, the emotional reaction is so powerful. It's creating some kind of neurological change in the brain of the veteran. And the wives are telling us, or they say, all of a sudden my feelings started to come back.
They come back a changed man, too.
We've put Navy SEALs through this program. They come out of the round pen in tears, but they're happy because they can feel again. They're so used to being
Bottling
shut
it up.
down, right, because you have to protect yourself. See? That's what we do. We protect ourselves from the emotion that we can't handle. And when you're overloaded in the military with traumatic events, and it doesn't really have to be all that bad sometimes, you know?
So how come more people don't know about this program, or is this being replicated elsewhere?
Well, the way I set it up, I didn't know if it was going to work. I was just looking at record suicides 5 years in a row. I was looking at my generation.
Where were the suicides? In the Albany area or
All over,
nationwide?
nationwide.
Okay.
You know, record suicides, and that's
In what years?
well, the last 5 years.
Last 5 years.
Last 5
okay.
years. And prior to that, they weren't really keeping accurate records. And they still don't know the true number. But it's unbelievable. But I looked at it from my perspective as a Vietnam veteran. And I could see on the wall in Washington 58,000 names of individuals that died in Vietnam. But how many people knew more than 58,000 of the individuals that came back from Vietnam? kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Who's keeping track of that? Well, those numbers now are being exceeded by the current generation of veterans in the last 10, 15 years.
Are they adding more names to the wall because of that?
No, because
No,
that's
those
Vietnam.
those are for combat over here. So
Right.
it's
Again, I
not
want our
after.
viewers to understand, that's why.
Yeah.
All right, no, it's
Okay.
smart, but why do you think it's more, though? That's the question, though. Because they're keeping better records?
Well,
or
yeah,
is-
they're starting to recognize. I see now that they're going back and looking
Yeah.
at the suicides. I mean, this has been going on for years. The VA, did get in trouble there for not announcing deaths of World War II vets as suicides.
Now, I often heard that when the folks came home in the mid-'70s, they came home from Vietnam, they really weren't welcomed home. There was no parade, there was just kind of blending into society, and, is that the way you recall?
Well, that's the way it was because everybody was so divided. We don't even want to talk about this.
Okay,
You know,
so did that
kids were
contribute to a lot of
Yeah, I'm
the
sure
trauma
it did.
and
Because you
emotional?
have that disconnect.
Yeah.
How does the veteran come back in and emotionally reconnect with society?
Mhm.
Well, back then you were a Vietnam vet. We don't want to talk about that.
And now, in the history books, Vietnam has a page or two
Yeah.
in the history books. I mean, it's sad because
Right.
the war was so traumatic if
Yeah.
you lived during that time.
But it doesn't matter what war you were in. You see, you can
Really,
go.
because I think Mark has a good point, though. I mean, in World War II, when you came back, wow, you're a hero. Thanks for, we won. And, I mean, that's why I'm sure a soldier came back. We got him. And, yeah, you're a good guy. Vietnam, I had a person actually talk to my Chabad house, and he came back. He was a captain, and he told about his stories in Vietnam. And he says he went to a party, so some gathering, and they, came out, oh, you just came out of Vietnam. And someone came over to his face and says, you're a child killer. I didn't kill any children.
that's-
What are you,
that's
and
society.
to say that to somebody?
You
over
got
here?
society trying to disengage themselves from accountability and responsibility. When you send a kid to war, I don't care what war you're going to send them to. If this country sends them, you got to be prepared to deal with the fallout when they come home. So now that we're beyond the physical injuries, now the emotional injuries are starting to show up. They've always been there, but we never really looked at them. So what's good? And the number 2 guy at the Pentagon said this is going to go on for years, because it takes a while till the veteran is willing to acknowledge that they have disconnected. Usually, and I tell the wives, it's always a sad thing, but I tell the wives, you can't love them out of this. You just can't, no matter how hard you try, because they're in a place that they don't know how to get out of themselves.
A lot of times they say in general, even with anything without war, men just don't show their emotions. They're told, don't cry, look again, buck up and be strong.
All right, but
And-
now we have women in the armed forces.
combat.
Do they express more emotion more easily, or are they?
Not necessarily.
No.
I mean, it's the same thing. If we have female veterans come to us, and they may be coming to us in a little different area, there's a lot of sexual assault now is a big component in the military, 26,000 cases.
Really, that many? I didn't know.
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff. But what happens is they're always, even the regular Army, they're not dealing with the issue properly. They're trying to be all things to all people. Oh, we're going to give you all these classes on suicide prevention, but the individual that really needs it, they're not coming forward.
Right.
They're not coming forward because they're so shut down. They've been through all the talk therapy. They know it doesn't work. They've been through the medication. That's not working. So what we've done here is we've taken this procedure, we've taken the human element out of it, and when that horse bonds with the human, with the predator, the predators had to change to learn the flight animal's language. But when that connection takes place and the horse bonds with the human, that's what's so emotionally powerful, that it triggers this change. And we can actually almost see it happen. If you ever go to my website, you can watch the reaction of some of
on
the
the videos
veterans,
that you
listen to
have.
what they're saying.
Well, I want to bring Lance
Yes.
into this. I don't want to
Sure.
ignore you.
Sure.
You're an Iraq War veteran.
Yes, sir.
And what was your experience when you came back from your tour of duty?
Well,
Did you feel that emotional inhibition?
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I think I think Bob's right on. A lot of the stuff he describes. I'd like to turn to the rabbi's question for a moment, though, which is, you're right, coming back from World War II, there was a great sense of accomplishment. If anything, I think that history has kind of sugar-coated the struggles that a lot of veterans went through coming home. But they always were able to lean on that one piece of saying, like you hear now in discussions of the greatest generation of, you know, we saved the world. And indeed, a lot of ways they did. But what did the Korean vets have a chance to look back at and say, here's what we accomplished? They ended up fighting to a stalemate. You know, the Vietnam generation, I mean, when that generation of soldiers went to war and came back, what were they able to turn to? I mean, they were sitting there like the rest of us in April 19, well, I was a bit young at the time, but a lot were watching the fall of the gates of the palace in Saigon in April 1975. What were veterans supposed to think then? And then you take a look at our current generation of wars, and I can say on a personal level, you know, much that happened over there on a personal level. You know, a lot of it challenged me a great deal, and a lot of it, you know, a lot of it I'm proud of, but that's at a personal level. And I can say that everyone I went over with came back with me, and that's something I can look at with satisfaction. But at a higher level, can I look at how I made the world better? Don't think so. Don't think so. And that's got to be a struggle when adapting. When I came back, we got the celebrations you never got, but in a lot of ways, you know, obviously you go to the celebrations and you smile and you put on a good face for it, because there's a lot of well-meaning folks out there who wanted to come out and say, hey, great job, we're behind you. But when all of that is over, you know, what is there to lean back on? It rings very hollow, and it's no fault of those well-meaning folks who want to support the troops.
You know, Mark, I have a question. A little bit different. I don't know how you went into Vietnam, because there was a draft then. Were you drafted into the Army?
Oh, well, I wound up joining because I flew helicopters and I was an obligated volunteer, so I had to volunteer.
Maybe that would be a point. I understand, because obviously you were a volunteer because there was no draft was done. But maybe that would be a difference. Because volunteer, you say, hey, I want to support the country and I'll do something for the country. I could see a draftee, and I guess I say I'm 29 years old, but a little bit, I had friends going to Vietnam. I don't want to be here. What are you like doing in this place with a gun shooting people? I didn't want to, who wants this? You know, so obviously right from the get-go, you're saying, this is garbage to me. I don't want anything to do with this, so you're going to be able to, but maybe a volunteer, hey, you know, I want to support the United States Army, whatever reasons. Sure. You could say why you went in over here, but, you know, well, maybe there would be a different attitude.
I was going to ask Bob, can you go back to Vietnam and see it in a different way? Or where were you? Were you in Cambodia? Were you in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot, the 101st Airborne.
Can you go back?
I'm not really interested in going back.
Okay.
I have friends that have gone back and it's completely changed, and they say people are great and all that.
They got McDonald's there. They got Western. Well, they're westernized and.
Right. But really, ultimately, what happens is war becomes very personal.
Yeah.
Okay. So all the ideology, all of the, theories about it, it doesn't matter. When you go there and you're with your buddy, and your buddy disappears in a flash, and you're left standing unhurt, no Purple Heart for you, but for your mind. Okay.
Do you have buddies that you get together with and you still stay in touch with now that it's with social media? It's easier, but
well, a few. But for the Vietnam generation, we, been there, done that. Let's let it go, move on.
Move on.
Because what's the point in talking about it? And that's what happens. A lot of people we run into, they rehash, can't let it go. That's why sometimes the talk therapy groups about let's keep talking about this.
Not good.
The reinforcing a nightmare.
What's your profession? What's your profession that you came home to do? What do you have to use?
Well, I basically came home unemployed.
Right, but what did you
develop into? And then I eventually went into, I became an airline captain.
Oh, okay. Which airline?
American Eagle.
Okay.
So I did 24 years of that. And then once I started WarHorse, I got so busy.
This is something you developed the WarHorse?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
I didn't develop the...
You're a better psychologist than a captain at Air Force. You did better than all the psychologists, psychiatrists.
I didn't invent the horse technique. The horse technique was developed for horse people so they wouldn't abuse horses, because if you could communicate with the horse would cooperate. You didn't have to force it. You didn't have to break it. It just said, oh, that's what you want. But as a predator, they're looking for an escape route the whole time. So when you can communicate, the horse changes, okay? So what I did, I was able to do that, and that was so emotionally powerful and so unexpected that you could actually do this, that I started working on it with veterans who I knew were struggling with issues, and from day one, they would turn around. And it was just such an emotional, 180 for them.
So where's this farm?
We operate out of Saratoga.
On what, not the flat track?
No,
Where-
just a farm outside of Saratoga.
No, can you tell us what?
The name of that particular farm is Willow Run.
Okay.
But we're looking to expand our operation because I need the privacy to
Okay.
do what I do, because the veterans coming are so sensitive,
Right.
That they don't want anybody looking at them. This is kind of a last
Sure,
resort.
yeah.
So I have to maintain that confidentiality.
Who's subsidizing all this? This must be a big budget.
Well, the first couple of years I paid for it.
Really?
And then when I started getting some traction and veterans started talking about it, and the thoroughbred industry started looking at what I was doing, because I was actually helping them, individuals started coming out, and when they saw what was happening for the veteran, they said, what can I do?
Yeah, what's your
And
budget now?
they just
Any
started.
government money?
No.
No, but
Zero.
what's your budget? What's your income, for the whole project?
Well, as we expand this program, I've graduated about 100 veterans so far,
Right.
and we're looking to do 500 a year. So we're
Okay.
talking $1 million budget.
Yeah, no,
easy.
that's a
what you
big
have now?
operation.
But, yeah,
Is that what you're at now? Is it
well, we're about at $500,000.
$500,000,
So
okay.
we're continuing to get corporate sponsors now.
Right.
Not even sponsors, they're just corporations that are saying, oh my God,
You're doing a great thing
this is
here.
meaningful.
Yeah, right.
This is meaningful.
Yeah.
We're so used to writing the check for a charity, but look what you're doing for the veterans. I
Right.
say, not me.
And I'm
You're
sure
doing
that
it
some of
now.
those people writing the checks were veterans, and
That's
they can
right.
really feel for it.
They knew.
So some of these corporate
Yeah.
executives,
Yeah.
Sure.
there's a link there for the heart.
Is there
you know.
connected to wounded war veterans? I know my barber in
Well-
Delmar is, that's how I know it, really.
Yeah, there are a lot of organizations out there, okay,
Right.
but there's a lot of duplication of effort and services and all that. My main focus is the suicide
Therapy,
issue
yeah,
and the
right.
post-traumatic stress.
I want to get something else. You have a barber? I'm sorry.
Listen, Mark,
I
let's
just-
get not personal around here. I told you I'm 29 years old, and
I'm
that's
sorry.
enough for you.
Lance.
But I don't
what
know,
was
why,
your-
why wasn't
wait
the
a minute.
government subsidize you, just to finish that
Oh.
thought?
Well,
I mean, the
eventually they
Veterans
will.
Affairs should
But
put some
the-
money in. You're doing such a
They
service.
should, but I've had
Really?
years of discussion with them.
Really?
And the attitude really is, well, that's not the way we do it. And there's so much red tape
Right.
that they can't do it.
Yeah.
So they're all frustrated that, so I said, okay, I'll just do it myself.
Right.
And I was able to prove what I could do.
The
We've been
concept.
published in a medical journal. We've got people calling us
That must
saying,
feel so good.
yeah,
It really does. It's
Yeah.
like you proved them,
yeah, right,
That proof of concept is great,
right.
So I'm, as we say in Hebrew, yasher koach to you. It's really great that you know.
No, Les, I want to say, I know I actually visit Jewish prisoners, but this Jewish organization, Aleph, if you ever heard of them, they deal with Jewish, they call it their magazine Liberator, but they deal with anybody away from home. That's prisoners, all military away from home. But, it used to be, I don't know if they even say that anymore, but the Jewish, soldiers, I think in World War II, I've read that, the Jews don't fight, the
Oh,
Jews
wow.
are not. So what's your, like I say, Jewish life?
Jews always fight.
Well, it depends where they're fighting. But, because you were more a volunteer, so you can say Vietnam, they don't care if you're a Jewish partisan, who cares who you are. But now volunteers, that, where do you find, there are Jewish, because I have seen pictures, that's through the
sure.
Aleph, they get together for Hanukkah, and, they try to give them some Jewish
Well,
kind of life.
you're right, I was a volunteer. I was a careerist. I spent 21 years in the Army.
Really?
And I'll tell you that the question you asked about the perception that Jews don't fight,
Yeah.
you probably should have someone behind you holding up a stop clock or something, because I can do this for a while. I could talk about this issue.
Yeah.
The issue you raise is actually the one that was the genesis that formed the Jewish war veterans in the first place.
Right.
One thing that folks don't know is that Jewish War Veterans of the United States is now the oldest still existing veterans organization in the country. We were formed in 1896 as the Hebrew Union Veterans in a response to public sentiment a very vocal minority, I'd like to think, that made the perception that promulgated the opinion that the Jews did not do their part in the American Civil War.
Right.
Which
You said
1896 we date to.
Wasn't that the Mexican-American War or something?
Oh, no, that's the 1840s. No, in 1896 it was
there was another.
there was the Spanish-American War in
Mexican-Spanish.
1898, where VFW eventually got formed out of.
Okay.
So we predate them.
Right.
But
the Civil War.
But it was discussions about the Civil
War.
War, and Mark Twain, among others, was one of the high-profile people who actually helped promulgate this particular opinion. And to his credit, after Hebrew Union veterans were formed and there was some publicity put out about Jews that had fought in the Civil War, he retracted his statements. But Jews, for instance, in World War II, it's Jews that actually served in a proportion higher than their proportion in the population. During my time in the service, I met a number of Jews. Was there a large number? Absolutely not. When I was in Iraq, I was the lay leader in Baghdad at the Victory Base complex. And we had a minyan as often as not. Some of them weren't Jews, so they didn't count for a proper minyan, but people would come to our services. For the high holidays, they were flying in Jews from outlying operating bases to come in.
I should say that at West Point and at the 10th Mountain Division, there's a Jewish contingent in both places. That there's not, it's not devoid of the Jewish representation.
Absolutely.
And also in the Civil War, there's a story I'd love to tell about how Ulysses S. Grant as a general, kicked Jews out of the South because he thought they were driving up the price of the cotton. And then Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, who was formerly of Albany but living in Cincinnati at the time, went to President Lincoln the day after he gave the Gettysburg Address. And he told him what was going on with this order to kick the Jews out. And Lincoln communicated with Grant and said, you have to rescind this, you can't kick the Jews out. And that's what saved the Jews from expulsion from like 3 or 4 states.
I always like reading about Jewish, life in America, and of course the world also. And people, when I throw out a number to them, because Holocaust is 6 million Jews, pretty much everybody knows that. But then it says, there was 11 to 12,000 American Jews that were killed, and Americans killed 11,000. 11,000. I mean, every one person. Again, maybe it pales to 6 million, but 11,000 American Jews were killed. Yeah, they were American soldiers.
See, now I never would have even thought of that in Vietnam, because when I got in country, 2 of the guys I met almost right off the bat that were pilots in my unit, Larry Rosen and Alan Schwartz, were some of the most decorated pilots in our unit.
Is that the Larry Rosen from Albany?
No.
The Judge Rosen.
There's probably more than one,
Make sure.
Sadly, the history of American Jews serving in uniform is one of the best kept secrets. Why it should be a secret, I don't know.
I don't know either.
If you watched any of the war coverage, I think on MSNBC, he's a commentator. There's a fellow named Jack Jacobs.
Yep.
Jack Jacobs is one of the 2 Medal of Honor winners, Jewish Medal of Honor winners from the Vietnam War. It never says that in his byline there under under his name on the screen. But
maybe that's it, because once you're in the American Army, you're not Jewish anymore.
Right.
You're
American.
You're
going to get
American,
killed just as quick as the next guy.
Yeah, I know. So it's not like you're a Jewish person or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason.
Do you have any, Lance, do you have any final thoughts or something you'd want to say about your post 105 in the final seconds that we have?
Oh, sure. I guess the main thing I'd want to say is that the leadership of our post, myself as the commander, our vice commander, Todd Rosenfeld, our quartermaster, Sam Spitzberg, and our secretary, Rich Goldenberg, we're one of the few JWV posts that all of the leadership are veterans of the Iraq or Afghanistan wars.
Wow.
And we know that there are Jews out there who have served, especially in the current wars. I'm also very active in the American Legion, and I know that this younger generation of veterans are not aware that these veterans organizations are there for them. They're their organizations. It's not their grandfather's American Legion anymore. It's not their uncle's JWV. It's there for them. And we are there symbolically, to the American public, representing the face of Jewish American service members. But not only that, we're also there as brothers and sisters taking care of brothers and sisters. So I would ask is that your audience is, if they're aware of Jewish vets who have served in these wars, reach out to us.
Okay.
If it's okay, I'd like to give my email address.
Quickly.
And they can, okay, Lance, Lance.Allen, Allen, @hotmail.com.
Okay.
Reach out to me. We'd like to get them involved in the organization.
Beautiful. May you have
Listen,
many more years of continued success.
And Bob and Lance, you did a good service to the country, and I mean, it is important, and a Jewish person is obligated, and I'm talking about Jewish law. If the country needs help, then you help them out, and that's really part of Jewish law. There's no Jewish law that run away and get away from, the army. There's no such a thing. So again, like Mark says, a Hebrew Yashakeh, good job that you supported the United States, that we're so fortunate to live in such a beautiful country like this. Should continue with good health and helping people like you both are doing.
Schönen Dank, mein Freund.
Okay.
Bye.